I'm a bit late to the party, and I haven't done one of these in a while, but here we go. Hi everyone, I'm William Strife, and I've had a pretty big hiatus from YouTube for a while now. The last real major project I did was a Skyrim Let's Play, though there have been some other Minecraft series since. But regardless, I got my start with Bethesda games, so this seems a perfect time to jump back into things. That, and I was explicitly asked to do something like this on Twitter. So here's the deal. Starfield, Bethesda's new game coming out in 2023, and they've finally begun to pull back the curtain to show it off. There's a reasonable amount of both hype and skepticism about it, and naturally, I've got my own opinions as well. First things first, No Man's Skyrim. That's what a lot of people are calling Starfield, and I say the comparison is pretty apt given what Bethesda showed off. Now, for context, because not everyone has played it, No Man's Sky is a massive space simulation game released in late 2016. In it, you can build bases, complete quests, salvage, buy, and upgrade spaceships. The list goes on, because it is an incredibly big game. To say it had a rocky launch would be an understatement, but it's come a long way, and the modern iteration of No Man's Sky really does look similar to what Starfield presented in its initial showcase. Thus, the comparisons make plenty of sense. I won't bother getting into direct comparisons, but I will address some of the cynicism I personally had. Cynicism that looks a lot like what I've seen many people express on social media. It more or less boils down to some variation of, wow, you're just making a game that's already on the market. After I had that same thought, I tempered my cynicism with a hammer known as experience. But to totally understand why I did that, I need to talk about a totally different game. Overwatch. In mid-2016, when the first Overwatch came out, I could not have cared less about it. The main reason was how I saw it as just a different version of Team Fortress 2. Thus, my thought was, why make or even play a game that's already been done and is still active on the market? No joke, that was my attitude. Essentially, only one team-based shooter is allowed at a time. Well, lucky for me, my partner back then felt differently and bought me a copy to play anyway. As I jumped into match after match, I came to realize something. I enjoyed Overwatch a lot more than I ever enjoyed Team Fortress 2. The result was I played it for years and logged many more hours with the diverse and bizarre cast of characters of Overwatch than I ever did with the quirky mercenary group of TF2. Now, the point of this little anecdote is how there's always room for another game of the same style on the market. Furthermore, there's a lot of room for improvement, especially if there's not a lot of competition for the particular genre of game. When you get down to brass tacks, open-world space operas are not a particularly common type of game. The space games I can think of off the top of my head include No Man's Sky, Elite Dangerous, Star Citizen, and Rebel Galaxy. But you can't really compare all those games just because they focus on space, since they almost completely focus on different styles of gameplay. Thus, my point, you can't dismiss Starfield just because it looks like it's doing the same thing as No Man's Sky, or simply looks like a similar but different space opera. Now, all of that said, this is where we start to get into the nitty-gritty of what they actually showed off for Starfield, and also where my true reservations about the game begin. Let's start at the top with character creation, which seems a much more interesting process than what was in either Skyrim or Fallout 4. You get to choose a background, which is reminiscent of taking a character class in old games like Morrowind and Oblivion, as it seems to decide some starting stat boosts. Then, there's traits, which we only ever saw in New Vegas and Bethesda has never really played with before. You can choose up to 3 of them, and just like in the Mojave, they cut both ways, giving a special bonus at the cost of a penalty. As a whole, Bethesda has increasingly drifted away from character sheets and relying on numbers, which is honestly still a disappointment for me personally. Even so, as long as they keep learning lessons from systems that didn't work all that well, like the bloated and ineffectual perk chart from Fallout 4, I'm willing to give them the benefit of the doubt. In fact, I'm intrigued by the new skill system as, when you scrutinize what's shown, it looks like you have to initially unlock new skills by spending points at level up, but then improving the skills is done by actually using them in certain ways. This sounds like a fun hybrid system between how things worked in pretty much all Elder Scrolls games and the perk chart in Fallout 4. It's got my attention, mostly because I love the type of role-playing I can do in Bethesda games, but I also have additional worries in that regard. It was never showed explicitly in the showcase whether or not you, as the main character, are voiced. I'm just not a fan of main characters who are voiced, and the exceptions are limited. Now, the way you're allowed to write your own backstory, and the way NPC discussions look very similar to older games like Fallout 3 and Oblivion, makes me hopeful. However, it'll be major marks off for me if it turns out I only have 4 dialogue options again and they all just boil down to various flavors of yes. That's pretty much everything I have to say about character creation and role-playing, so let's now talk about the biggest thing that worries me: base building. I will be entirely honest. Building a base was only sort of fun in Fallout 4 the first time I played it. After that, though, in every subsequent run, it's been nothing but an annoying mechanic I feel pressured to interact with. Please do not turn a role-playing game into a settlement simulator. I don't want to be forced to endlessly collect supplies and build base after base. I don't want to source workers so I can gain special supplies to fabricate the best weapons or mods in the game. I don't want another settlement to need my help. And look what they did. Listen, I don't have a problem with games that have a heavy focus on crafting, building, and resource collection. That's what Minecraft is built around, and I have thousands of hours in it. That's mostly what I've done in No Man's Sky, and I have close to 200 hours in it. What I do have a problem with is an RPG, which is about role-playing, adventuring, questing, dungeon delving, and collecting loot, focusing more on being a settlement simulation game. I don't have a problem with crafting getting deep, but when you tell me I have to run a colony in order to manufacture enough ammo to reliably shoot the best gun in the game, you have officially lost sight of who even wants that gun, what they find fun, and why they're playing your game in the first place. This is my worry, that in an RPG, the simulation components will be forced down your throat before you can continue to play the RPG part. This ties into something else, though. The number of planets you can explore in Starfield. I know I led with reasons I'm hopeful for Starfield, and we've quickly gone down a darker path, but this one I'm not entirely certain how it will shake out. Todd Howard explicitly stated that there will be more than 1,000 planets to explore, and this is where the No Man's Sky comparisons hit their peak. Most of the exploring you do in No Man's Sky is pretty, well, boring. Once you've seen a dozen different planets, you've seen them all. If this is what happens in Starfield, it'll be in stark contrast to Bethesda's main strength in all of their games: incredibly good world design. For all of the mechanical faults I can name in Skyrim or Fallout 4, I can hardly produce a single complaint for the actual world you explore. One of the reasons they hit so hard or land so well is because of how dense they are. There's just so much to see that you trip over new locations for hours and hours. In addition to this, each location tends to have some fun environmental storytelling, things that don't actually affect the game on any mechanical level, but act as flourish to show that the area you're in has been lived in at one point or another. What no one can be certain of is, does that style of world still exist? And if so, how does it commingle with the procedural generation necessary to make that many planets possible? Do you get mostly empty planets with little to no dungeons or outposts? If the outposts and dungeons are there, are they all cookie-cutter procedurally generated structures with procedurally written stories in them that rapidly get redundant? What if the handcrafted dungeons are still there, but all concentrated on one planet? Would they be spread out, so far apart it takes forever to reach them? Or are they all concentrated into a small populated area, with the rest of the planet being pointless? In the past, Bethesda games have been criticized for being large as an ocean, but deep as a puddle. In my experience, that usually referred to the role-playing elements, not the world. This new direction with Starfield, however, makes me worry that the single most standout element of Bethesda games is now getting significantly watered down. There's just no way to know if they found some perfect balance that still makes it work until the game comes out. And that is what gives me so much trepidation. Anyway, those are pretty much all of my thoughts, though I have left out some extra tidbits that didn't really fit in here, like how the creation engine has changed a lot in the wake of what they had to get it to do for Fallout 76, but that's a whole different can of worms. Thanks for watching and listening, and let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Until next time though, I'm William Strife, and I'll see you later.